Good morning and welcome to Unraveled Game Thoughts. We're going to talk about birds today. I have sorted through the all the bird cards in Wingspan for every expansion that is out there. And sorry, I'm trying to get my hat straight here. It's not working. Uh, but my goal was to kind of see what are the birds that have the most potential points. So I just called it potential points, and the base value of a potential point is the number of eggs a bird can hold plus the point value of that bird outright. So I'll hold this one up as an example, or actually I'll just grab another one off the top here as an example. So the point value of this bird is 4, and it can hold 2 eggs. So it starts with a base of 6. And in this case, you can draw 2 bonus cards and pick one. So I would probably give this a 6 plus because there is potential to get more points off of it, off the bonus card. The potential can be pretty variable. Some things, I mean, a bonus card could give you, it depends on the bonus card, really. There's a lot of variable points, or you could get 0. So I tried to kind of think through what's the cap that a bird can give a lot of times. For instance, this one is a uh, holds 2 eggs, 9-point bird. So 11 is this one's cap. This bird is not going to get you more than 11 points, period. So it's going to go in my 11-point range. And then there are other birds that might offer some odd bits and pieces. So like here's one that is 6 points and 2 eggs. So 8-point potential value right out the gate, but it can lay 2 eggs on each other bird in this column. So assuming that you had 2 other birds in the column, then you're looking at 12 points for this bird. So I would have capped this bird at 12. And I wouldn't give it 8 plus. I would just give it 12 because it's the most points you could possibly get from the bird generally. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule for every single bird I came across. There were some where, I mean, getting the most potential points is, I guess the potential point value is much higher than what is actually going to happen in a game. And so I factored in, for instance, a bird that can cash something on every other bird you have. I factor in like, well, in round 1, probably the most you're going to have is 4 to 5 birds if you're putting out pretty cheap birds. But I think about average is 3 to get out in that first round. So I kind of calculated, well, if you had 3 birds in the first round and you added 2 each round after that, then this bird is cashing a food on all those birds every single round. Then that gets a max value. So I kind of tried to generalize uh, how much is realistic to some degree for certain games. And so that factors into just all that to say it factors in. There's not there's probably a more mathematical way to do this that's much more absolute, but you know, this is a hobby. I am not taking that much time. I took the time to sort through all the cards, so I did that much. But I thought it would be fun to talk about these birds in particular because they struck me as giving reasonable amounts of points or potential points for either a lower cost or in some of these cases, I'm going to start at the bottom here and work my way up. I mean, there's like up here in this corner, these birds can give you up to 30 points a game, 20 points a game, and then I sorted them basically into the values from 1 all the way up to 30 plus, and kind of saw how many could give things, and then sorted by okay, this bird costs this much, or there are other birds that can give you a lot of points in the game, but they're much harder to manipulate. Like you really have to be able to draw the right cards and kind of craft your game after those birds. These are probably the easier ones to use, and in some cases I have used them and found them to be not too hard to grok the points out of. So Let's start with the lower ones here that I found interesting. And what I'll do is I'll say the bird name and I'll try to take a picture of each one and pop it up on the screen so you can kind of see it and analyze it as I'm talking about these particular birds. Uh, but the first one here is the orange-footed scrub fowl. This is from the Oceania expansion, and you get to lay one egg on each of your birds with a multi-egg nest, including this one. It's an end game power. So there's potential to really set your try to get a lot of multi-egg nests and really spread out some eggs toward the end of the game. But this bird by itself has a potential point value of 6 points, with 1 point on the bird and 5 for eggs in the nest, and it can give you more. So I probably put this in the 6+ category because it's hard to say how many multi-egg nests you're going to be able to get, but this would include star nests. You'd be able to put eggs in those nests as well. And for one food, either a seed or a berry, that is fantastic. I would say that is a great value on a bird to be able to get 7 points out of one food, and it plays into the forest habitat where you're going to be getting food anyway, so it could help get your engine going really good at the front of the game. Not a bad first bird to get out near the front of the game. It's not going to increase the amount of food you get, but it would give you something to work toward and not a bad in-game goal that could synergize with some other birds. So um, let's see. The next thing I have here, and I think I have several of these birds that are hawks, largely because you can almost play them kind of for free. I mean, you might have to pay the egg cost, but the fact that you can take a card and tuck it from your hand underneath the bird, then they tend to have a potential point value that's fairly high for virtually no food cost, because for each rat you can usually tuck a card. So this is a great way to use cards that you're drawing that you don't think you want to play, that don't fit what you're doing in your habitat. But this one is the Northern Goshawk, is an example of one that's 7 plus 2 rats, so a potential point value of 9 that would have cost you no food if you had the cards to tuck. So not bad. 9 points for almost nothing is great value on a bird. This next one, the Budger Bug Budgergar, probably butchering the name. 0 point bird. So this is an easy one for folks to just kind of throw out and say, it's not worth any points. I'm not going to worry about it. It only costs one seed. It can be played in any habitat. So extremely versatile. Holds up to 3 eggs. Initial starting point, a potential point value is 3. So it's not much. But it can tuck the smallest bird in the tray behind itself. So where it has a lot of good potential point value is really the fact that it's so versatile. It can go into any habitat, only one food, and you can just tuck cards behind it as you're using it, whichever action you're using. But it's tucking the smallest bird in the tray. It doesn't even come from your hand. So it's not like you have to draw cards for it to tuck. It just tucks the smallest one. It doesn't look for a specific size or a greater or less than. So it's going to activate every single time. And if you can get this at the beginning of the game and successfully put it in the action row that you're going to be taking the most actions over the course of the game, you can get a lot of tucked cards behind this fella. So even though he starts with 0 points, a lot of potential for points there. I like that one. The next one is the barn swallow. One worm to play. Can go in the wetlands or the grasslands. And its starting potential point value is 4. Has a star nest, so a lot of multi-potential in the star nest. But the thing for one, and it's got this ability, tuck a card from your hand behind this bird and then draw a card. There are a few birds like this in here. I don't know how many of them I got in this array, but there are a few in the game. This one in particular would have made this cut because for one worm, that's not bad. Worms aren't terribly hard to get, maybe the easiest food to get. And you're often, as you play Wingspan, going to want to cycle through some cards. And this is a great way when you can tuck a card and then draw one to replace it. That is fantastic. So this one had a lot of versatility. I think that's one that even though the potential points on the front end are kind of 4, the fact that and the way I calculated like potential points for something like this would have been I would have said, well, I always assume if you're playing the bird in the first round. Obviously, some of these birds and the things I'm going to describe, they're not going to be worth as many points if you draw them in round 4. If you play them in round 4, you're obviously not maximizing the amount of points. So I'm kind of playing with the idea, getting one of these birds in the first round, and then maximizing it throughout the game. What are the potential points from these birds? So that think of it that way. So for one like this, the barn swallow, starting with the 4 potential points, 1 point outright plus 3 eggs it can hold. And then I'm assuming that at least once per round, I would tuck a card and draw a card. So at the end of the game, I'm getting at minimum 8 points from this. Now, there's more points than this. I probably just put it in 8 and not the 8 plus, but I could have put it in 4 plus, but the odds of you using this bird are very, very high because it's not hard to use. And oftentimes you're going to get cards that you're going to use either to get extra food when you're trying to get food, or you're going to use it for birds like this that you can tuck it and draw another card because you know it's not a bird you want to play. So barn swallow, thought that was a good one. It's another eagle or hawk. 3 rats, or I guess they're technically vertebrates. They're not really rats, but they look like little rat symbols on the card. So 9 points outright, 10, 11, 12 if you end up tucking cards from your hand for basically a free bird for 12 points. You cannot beat that if you have something in your engine that allows you to draw enough cards to meet it. This other eagle is roughly the same, 9, 10, 11, 12. Basically 12 for just some tucked cards. Again, if you have a card tucking engine, you're doing good. This one in particular can be played in any habitat, so that's fantastic. The other one has to be played in the grasslands, so a little more limited, but 12 points if you didn't have to pay any food for it. It's hard to beat. All right, next two, we have the common chaffinch. 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 If Elizabeth Hargrave watches this, she's probably going to thumbs down the video because I'm butchering these bird names. I don't ever actually say them out loud very often. 6 points, potential points outright. Choose 1 to 5 birds in this habitat and tuck one from your hand behind each. This one's a tougher one, slightly tougher one to manipulate, and you want to make sure you have cards in your hand that you can tuck. You have to play this in the forest or the grasslands, and so you're not putting it in the wetlands where when you draw cards, you're going to have extra cards to work with. So you kind of are going to have to switch back and forth between a couple of habitats, or rather, what do you call it? Environments, actions you're triggering. But the fact that you can tuck 1 to 5, tuck a card behind every bird in the habitat when the brown power triggers is not bad. I would say that harder than some of these other ones that I'm describing will be, but not a bad power, and certainly potential to with being at 4 points outright for 1 food. You have a lot of potential there, up to, I forget what the value that I valued this at. I probably figured 10 at least for 1 food by the end of the game, assuming you were tucking something. I have played with this one before, and it is tougher to manipulate it in a way where you have enough cards to tuck, but still not a bad one. This one, the Crimson Chat, is 6 point value outright. You can discard a food to tuck 1 card from the deck behind this bird. So this one I really like because all I have to do is have an extra food. Even though it's played in the grasslands, typically, if I can just set it up so I have at least 1 extra food, and often, just based on dice tray issues and things like that, you're likely to occasionally have a food that you don't need. And then if you can pull this off and And do this once a round. I probably calculated this out at what, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I probably figured once a round, if you can trigger it up to 10 points for one food, not a bad deal. So that is the lower points. In each of these sort of sections here is jumps up the point value. So I think these were birds that were in my 1 to 6 or 7 point range, potential point range, but had a little bit higher excuse me, capability to get points, but all for one food. Not bad. There are other birds that do similar things, but they cost more food, so they kind of didn't make this final like really good birds to look for cut. All right, we have next the Eurasian Nutcracker at 7 point value outright, 5 plus 2 eggs it can hold. Choose 1 to 5 birds in your forest, and you can cache a seed from your supply on each. So this does require you to build up seeds in the food from the dice tray, but it does also play into the forest where it would trigger whenever you take the food action, you trigger itself. So this one, you probably wouldn't want to have more than one bird that feeds off of food to some degree, but this one is a good, not a bad one. And if for 5 points outright and one food, I would consider playing this as my first bird in the forest just to have it be a bird that gives me 5 points, and even if I didn't use it for anything else. But the fact that I could potentially cache my seeds onto here, not a bad deal. Next one, we are going to talk about the common chiffchaff, and this is 3 points plus four eggs, so 7 points outright, potential points. 1 to 5 birds in the habitat, take 1 from your hand behind each. Again, this is like that other one, but a little bit higher point value on the back end. Where was the other one? Oh, the other one was 4 with 2 eggs. This is 3 with 4 eggs. So it just has a few more egg slots to work with than the other one. Okay. First teal power, I think. I don't think we had a teal power yet, but now we have a teal power from European expansion. And I'm sorry, I didn't actually say what all these expansions, most of these look like they're from European. We have the black stork. It could be played in the wetlands or the forest. Fish in a invertebrate. 5 points outright. This one can lay 1 egg on each of the birds immediately to the left and right of this bird. So if you're able to get a bird to the left and right with this bird in each round of the game, then you're looking at, what is that, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 30. It's like 13 points or something. Not bad for 2 food, and getting that doesn't require that those birds don't have eggs or anything like that. It's just you can lay 1 on each of the birds immediately to the right and left. Just not a bad bird. Not a bad bird to get out. Lots of points there to be had. It doesn't interact with the egg habitat, but I don't think it needs to. And it's an end round goal, so it gives you time to set it up whenever you play it, assuming it's not like the last thing you play in a round. That is the black stork. All right. Next we have, and that is from the Asia expansion. I don't think I mentioned that, but that is from Asia. This is an original bird in the game. This is a Canada goose. Can be played in wetlands or grasslands. 6 points outright. And it is discard 1 seed to tuck 2 from the deck behind this bird. I think there's a few birds like this. Yeah, the very next one is virtually the same, just a different variation in points. So this one's initial potential point value is 6. The next one is going to be 7, but they do the exact same thing. Excuse me. The black-bellied whistling duck is the one right behind it, so I might just picture these two together because they do the same power. But if you can make sure that you have a seed every time this bird triggers, and I just calculated their potential score based on if you're able to trigger it once per round, but if you could trigger it more than once per round, even more. but you're looking at, see this one with a lower value. Overall, starting 6, if you did it once per round, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 points for 2 seeds. So not a bad deal. And this one with slightly fewer points to start with is actually more versatile and can be played in 2 different places. Unfortunately, none of them can be played in the forest, which is where you would get the food, the seeds you need to start with. But maybe you get another bird in there that feeds you a seed when you do the take eggs action or the draw cards action. That it just has a lot of potential points on a bird for only 2 food. Not bad. Next up, we have the house crow, and it is from the Asia expansion. 6 potential points outright, 3 for the bird, 3 eggs it can hold. You can cash up to 1 food from your supply on each bird in this row. So for 1 food of any type of your choice, you can do that. And that is a really good deal. You're looking at if you can just generate enough of a food engine, and this can be played in any habitat, so not a bad bird to start out increasing, getting any, whichever habitat you're trying to up your ability, the strength of that action in. This could go any of those, but feeds really well into some kind of a food engine where you're caching food on birds. And caches 1 on each in the row, so if there's a end game end round goal where number of birds in the forest, boom, put this in the forest, get a bunch of birds in the forest, and then just make sure that guy triggers every round. And if you can get your forest filled up by the end of round 2, this guy is going to have a field day in the forest if you get to cache that every round. So good bird, 1 to watch for sure in opening rounds, and I would try to snag that one most any time, especially if I can get 2 of these caching food birds chained together, because I think even when I was able to run a caching food engine, I still had a little food left over at the very end of the game, like 1 or 2, and I wasn't running it perfectly efficiently where I was just able to use my forest habitat. I had to use a couple of different habitats, so it wasn't quite as efficient as it could be. Anyway, enough about that. Crested Pigeon is 1 seed to play a initial potential cost of 7, but you can cash up to 8 from the supply on this bird. So you're looking at 15 points for this bird for 1 food if you max it out. It's an end of game, you have to have 8 seeds in your supply, but that is not a bad deal. So 15 points for 1, I would consider playing that early on in the game and then working my way toward it. All right, next up, that one's from Oceania expansion. We have the Ruff, and I've played this one a couple of times. I really like this bird. 4 potential points outright, but the teal ability is where this one hits home, because you can tuck up to 3 birds from your hand behind this bird and draw 1 for each card you tucked. This bird is fantastic. I mean, if you have 3 cards to tuck at the end of every round, that in and of itself is 12 points for this guy right out of the gate. 34. So he caps at 16 points basically, but for only 2, and if you can maximize that, that's not bad. You're averaging 8 points per food that you're playing. That's not a bad ratio to have. So I would take that. A lot of 8-point, 9-point birds that don't have any powers, they're going to cost you 3 food for those. So this guy is much more efficient than that, averaging 1 food for 8 points. So next up, we have the large-billed crow, and he can be played in any habitat, which I do like. Gives some flexibility there. You can cache a food from your supply on any bird, and if you do, you tuck a card from your hand behind this bird. So everything has to come from your supply, which is these are tougher to play because you really have to have them in your supply for it to work. But this starts out at 8 potential points. So not bad. It's only 2 food. And if you trigger it every round, you're talking another 8 points. So up to 16 if you only triggered it once per round. If you're able to trigger it more than once per round, even more. This is one of those that has a higher potential if you can get your engine and your habitat set up in a way that you can really maximize its potential. But it is a good bird, large-billed crow, not a bad one. All right, we are getting up here into some birds that can really hit home runs with some more points. So next up is an Oceania bird, the Australian magpie. And 6 potential points outright, but you can discard an egg from each bird in the row and column that this bird that has an egg on it. In this row and column that has an egg on it, excluding this bird. For each discarded egg, you cache 2 seeds from the supply on this bird. So let me do the math for us. If you put it in the dead center of your habitat, you're looking at potentially discarding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you can't count this bird. You don't take an egg off him. So up to 6 if it's dead center in your habitat, and then you're putting 12 seeds on this bird. So this guy, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18 points for 3 food starting. You know, if you can max it out and get the end game to trigger. So Australian magpie, not bad. 18 points. Now, it's kind of the cap. If you really fully max it out, you're not going to do that twice because it's the end game power, but still not bad. Not a lot of birds in the game are going to give you 18 points for the 3 food you spend on them. All right, then we have the maned duck. 6-point potential outright. And then you can tuck up to 3 from your hand behind this bird. If you tuck at least 1, you gain a seed from the supply. It takes any kind of food, any 2 food of any kind. So what are we looking at here? If you triggered it once per round and you had the cards in hand, it plays in the wetlands, so that's where you're going to draw cards anyway. We're looking at 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 points. 18 points if you can trigger it once per round and tuck 3 cards every time. That's not bad. And it, possibly more. I mean, you talking if you're able to create a very good card drawing engine, you could really get this guy to pony up some points for you. You can get well over 18, so that's like, I mean, it's got potential for more. But you know, I usually calculate the score based on once per round. I feel like that's more doable. A lot of games are going to be a little less than that, but we're going for potential points here. So next up from the Asia expansion, we have the Baya Weaver. And this is basically the same as that power. Tuck 3 from your hand behind this bird. If you tuck at least 1, you lay an egg on this bird. Now, this guy gave you 1 from the supply. This lays an egg on the bird itself. So it costs 3. It's a little more flexible because it can be played in 2 different habitats. Probably I'd want to play this in the wetlands habitat so that I could have more cards to draw to potentially tuck under it. But it also lays an egg on itself. So, and it's a star nest, so even more versatile when it comes to end round goals and bonus cards. But yeah, the Bio Weaver, that's not bad. What is that? 12, 34, 15, 16, another 18 points for 3 food. Not too bad. Not as efficient as that one we saw earlier, but not bad at all. Next up, we have the Rosy Starling. From the Asia expansion again, 3 food, can be played in any habitat. So very versatile. 7 potential points outright. Tuck up to 3 from your hand, and if you tuck at least 1, you gain a worm from the supply. So same as kind of the last 3 birds. It looks like they all kind of did the same thing. So I might have to post those together, but they are a lot of high potential points there, especially if you get those birds in the wetlands and maximize that. Now, someone may think, well, I'll just get all 3 of these birds together. I mean, if you were lucky enough to draw all 3, I don't think I'd want to play all 3 of these in the same habitat because that's 9 cards you're trying to get away with tucking, and you're not going to probably have that many cards to keep tucking over the course of the game. If you can somehow fit in some birds that really give you better card draws in between there, great. But I would probably say 1 or at most 2 of those with some other birds to help you draw more cards, is probably going to be a good engine. All right, we're getting to the top selections. These were the ones that I was kind of hunting for when I went through the entire deck to see what was there, to see what are these birds that I could potentially like really maximize to the nth degree and with the least amount of work if possible. So the first one here is a Eurasian coot. Uh, it is from the Asia expansion. 7 points, 7 potential points outright. Has a 4 egg nest. Tuck up to 3 cards from your hand behind this bird. Doesn't give you anything else. What makes this one a little more significant than these other ones is that it only costs 1 seed. So you're looking at, if we talk about the same kind of potential, 12 plus the 7, 19-point potential for one single seed. That is absolutely fantastic. If you can get this early and use it throughout the game and build off of it with other birds in your habitats, what a fantastic bird. That could probably get you well over 19. You could probably get into the 20 to maybe even up as high as 30 with just this one bird if you are able to play it right and maximize it. But that is the Eurasian coot. All right. These next 3 birds are birds that were in the 20-point range, the 20-plus point range. I can't remember exactly where in the 20s, but I was able to figure out that they would give 20. And for these last 5 birds here, these are all teal-powered birds. One's from Asia, 3 are from the European expansion. I think the European expansion was one of the ones that was not as well liked as compared to maybe Oceania or the Asia expansion. But I think with the addition of Oceania and Asia, some of these birds have actually gotten better because there's more things that you can use to trigger off of them. And I would not be surprised if future expansions end up really kind of pushing that to where you can make more of lesser birds than you normally would. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know what the plans are for the future expansions, but Stonemeyer, if you watch this, you definitely need the yin and yang from the duet mode. Got to have something that brings those together where you can combine them and you get a bonus or something. I don't know how you want to do it. Maybe it turns into an egg, but you can't have those black yin and the white yang and just have them sitting separate on those boards. There's got to be a way or something you do to put them together. It's just, it will be so satisfying. So please do that. All right, back to birds. Eurasian collared dove from European expansion, 7 points, potential points outright. Discard up to 5 food from your supply, and for each, tuck 1 from the deck behind this bird. So the teal power by itself, if you can maximize that, 20 points. Plus the 7, 27-point bird. If you maximize everything you can get out of it. It's not, if you build a food engine, it's not terribly hard to have 5 at the end of every round. And for 2 food, that's not bad. Now, it does play in the egg category, but most likely, even if you're trying to build a forest engine for the food, you're going to need some eggs just to get birds out in the forest. So it doesn't hurt that it's in the egg area. Next one, we have the common swift. I think this one gets targeted reasonably well because for 1 worm, it's 5 points outright plus room for 2 eggs. So you got a 7 potential point value. This one, you have to discard 5 worms from your supply and tuck a card from the deck for each worm. Now, this is more specific than the Eurasian collared dove, which can be 5 of any food. This one's a little harder to get 5 worms specifically, but it is still a 20-point potential value if you maximize it. Plus that is this 27. So same value as the other one. 1 less food to purchase it, but the other one, the Eurasian, is probably a tiny bit easier to use based on the wild food. The common starling can be played in a couple of different habitats. 7 points potential point value outright, discard 5 of any food, same power, same ability, 20 point potential point value using the power, and worth up to 7 otherwise. So you're looking at 27 points, 1 food cost to play this guy. So that's why this one, I saved this one for last as the best one, because not only do you get to play wild food, comes with 3 points, not too bad, and you have any food you can play and 2 different habitats you can play it in, so a lot more versatile than some of the other ones. I like that. Versatility is often very helpful when it comes to Wingspan and being able to do other goals and bonus cards, things like that. All right, we're down to the last 2 birds. These are the big baddies of Wingspan, if I was to argue that there are some big baddies. The Sri Lanka Blue Magpie from the Asia expansion. I have used this bird, and the game that I recall that I used this bird, I got like 30 to 35 points off of cached food, just off of cached food. Now, surprisingly, I did not win that game. It was very close. I got a lot off cached food. I think I still came in second. But this was a fun engine to play. It costs 3 food, so a little more to get out there. It is a 9-point bird outright, which is not bad. 11 potential points total, just without even the ability. But this ability, you may cache 1 food from your supply on each of your other birds. Now, to really maximize this, you have to build a good food engine. But man, I mean, you build up your sanctuary and you get this guy out, even if you just get him out for just the last turn and you have 12 birds in your sanctuary, that's 12 points you just got from this guy. Plus he's 9 outright. This is a very, very, very good bird. So really doesn't matter what round you get it in, but if you get him out the first round and get cached food every time because you made a nice food engine, you're looking at, man, 30 plus points easy from this bird if you get him out there the whole game and you maximize that food engine. So that's one of the things I think the Asia expansion really added to the Wingspan game. Doing a good food engine was pretty tough to do. I don't know if I ever actually saw a game where somebody did a food engine where they're caching food on birds to get points prior to the Asia expansion. Because you could get a little bit, but not enough that it seemed like it was more like bonus points, if anything, not really a serious strategy. With the Asia expansion, there's several birds that if you can chain them together, you got a serious food caching strategy that you can work with that's going to compete with the egg strategy and the card tuck strategy. All right, last bird, the house sparrow. 2 food, has to be played in the grasslands. 11 potential points outright, just 6 for the bird with room for 5 eggs. Discard up to 5 seeds from your supply. For each one, tuck a card from the deck. So this is like the other ones. It is 20-point potential value, and but it has a higher number of egg and stuff, 11 points, potential points outright. So that combined with the 20 gives it the 31, probably max value. I'd still say the Sri Lanka is the best one. That is just hands down seems like the best one you could work with. But the house sparrow is not bad and is definitely worth a look if you can maximize some of those points. And I mean, shoot, for 2, even if you only got half those points out of it, 15 for 2 food, not bad. That's not bad. Just trigger it a couple of rounds, and triggering it 1 round probably makes it worth it, because if you had 5 seed in any 1 round of the game that you could discard to tuck a card from each behind the deck, and you don't have to have 5, you can have less than 5 seeds. However many seeds you have, you can discard. But let's just say you had 5 for 1 round, then you got all your eggs on there and the points for the bird. I mean, that's 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, just 16 for 2 food. That's not bad. So that is my, I don't know if I want to call them my favorite birds, because I like other birds in the game too, but highest point value, potential point value / economic value based on food cost for a handful of birds in Wingspan. And I believe I've mentioned this in other videos, just a little sidebar at the end. If you are a fan of Wingspan, and you ever wonder what do these birds sound like, there is an app called Wing Song. I cannot remember the developer of the app. I don't even know if they're associated with Stonemeyer. But Wing Song app will kind of give you like a QR code window, and you hold it over a bird card, and then it'll make the sound that bird makes. So if you didn't know about that app, now you do. Little fun thing to do, especially if you have kids. We don't really pull that app out every time we play Wingspan, but it's really fun to show people, and it's fun to do sometimes if you're just curious. Especially if you're we take well with the nesting box, we're probably not taking it camping anymore, but we used to take Wingspan camping with us all the time, and it would be fun to see like what birds are we going to see, and if you could find the bird in here and you could do the app and find out what it sounds like. That would be, or see if it sounds close to what you're hearing where you're camping. That's a lot of fun. So there's probably a lot of applications of that, but that's the one I can think of. So thanks for joining me for this sort of unraveled raving video, talking about birds and random components in one particular game. If you liked it, give it a like. If you have a bird that you're like, hey, this bird's really good too, post it in the comments. I will say there's a ton of birds that have absolutely fantastic values or fantastic powers. I was really focusing on those that kind of give points by the end of the game. You can create some pretty good engines in your tableau with lower point birds that will help you aggregate points in other ways. And so there's plenty of really great birds, and there's lots of birds that are actually pretty efficient for the point value, their base point value, where you might just play them because they just give you a base point value that's really good. I just am focusing on, in this particular video, birds that over the course of the game maximize to their full potential, give you tons of points for either a lower food cost or just, man, they can just give you a ton of points. So there you go. Until next time. Thank you for joining Unraveled Game Thoughts.